It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for that nice greeting. If you told me 15 years ago I would be celebrating my 66th birthday in Iguazu Falls, speaking to a nice audience, I would have laughed and said, no, I don't think so. But here I am. And it's a wonderful present to be in Brazil for the first time, and in this beautiful city for my birthday. Okay. We have much to discuss, so let's begin. If you want to get in touch with Paradigm Research Group, the website or the email address is prg@paradigmresearchgroup.org if you wish to subscribe to the updates that are taking place. Now, presently we live in a pre-disclosure world. Very soon we're going to live in the post-disclosure world. What is that? Disclosure in this case refers to not small d disclosure, which is the revealing of information, the obtaining of information, but rather it's dealing with big D disclosure. And that's an event. It is a specific event defined by the advocacy movement, the worldwide advocacy truth movement. And it is this, and only this, the formal acknowledgement by the world's governments of a non-human extraterrestrial intelligence engaging the human race. This acknowledgement has not taken place because of a truth embargo that has been imposed by the United States government and its allies since the 1940s. This truth embargo was formally and typically called the UFO cover-up, but it's not a cover-up. It is in fact a legal truth embargo under national security law in the United States. The pre-disclosure world has been characterized by many things. One way I like to describe it is that for the last 10,000 years of civilization since the flood, we've been operating under Human Operating System 1.0. I call it HOS 1.0. We're very familiar with how that Human Operating System works. Its protocols, its policies. And I'm afraid it only leads to one place. And that's there. And that's not good. And so what is needed is, I believe, in a post-disclosure world, which is coming, is a new Human Operating System 2.0, HOS 2.0. And what will be the characteristics, or what are some of the characteristics of this new operating system, which is already starting? We're already seeing this happen in different countries. A lot of people are embracing a new way of thinking about themselves and the planet. But it primarily involves a worldview change on the part of millions of people, billions of people. Maybe not a huge change, but a small change across many human beings. And one way to define two of these worldview changes is human race and human space. Let's talk about the human race. There is a term in biology which in English is called specialization. In biology, it means the adaptation of an organism or a part of an organism to a specific function or condition in response to environmental conditions. An adaptation and response to environmental conditions. I would suggest that in the case of the organism Homo sapiens sapiens, that one of these conditions was the presence of an engagement by non-human intelligent beings, extraterrestrials, going back thousands and thousands of years. So I have come up with another term. This is not yet in the English dictionary. I have submitted it to the Webster Open Dictionary, and I have hopes that one day they may embrace it. It is specialization. Essentially, this term, which is separated by the other term by one letter, E to A, or A to E, I have defined as the process by which human beings place increasing emphasis on their connection as a member of the same species, as opposed to their membership in a myriad of social, political, racial, religious, and other subcategories. Specialization. In other words, in a post-disclosure world, when we have learned that we are not alone in the universe, we will be more conscious of the fact that our single connection is that we are part of the same species, Homo sapien sapiens. And that is what is critical. Not separation by nation or religion or other creeds or politics, but we are a species, and we're being engaged by other species from other planets. Once you start to think that way, it becomes a little more difficult to justify the next war killing members of your own species, the next genocide slaughtering members of your own species, the next exploitation, the next war. That would be a big change for the better. And I think the post-disclosure world, where we are not the only sentient species in the galaxy, will increase that worldview amongst billions of people. Now, the other is human space, and in this regard, we're talking about Earth-home focus. Since the environmental movement began in the 1950s, we have developed a greater sense of the Earth as our home, the environment, the biosphere, the connection of life. All good. We have a lot more to do there. This is our only planet. This is our home. Some people think that we can increase our population to 20 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion, but it's okay because we will then spread out to the galaxy like cockroaches and find other places to live. Wrong. There's already other species out there. And when our overcrowded planet then spills out, we're not going to be able to take our nuclear weapons and our bioweapons and our genocidal thinking with us. We may not even be allowed to go at all. And so, for now, this is our home. And if we don't take care of it, we will pay the consequences. And we're starting to see the imagery in media and elsewhere that is saying, embrace this planet seriously, not casually, but really seriously. And usually you see children in these ads, because after all, this planet is going to be theirs a lot longer than it's going to be ours. And so that is another change of worldview. Why? Because in the post-disclosure world, we learn there are other species, and they have their planets. And let's assume they take very good care of their planets. How are we doing here? This logical need to compare. And how are we doing? Not so good. All right? So this is the concept of worldview change that I see that could help generate the human operating system that is going to get us through the 21st century. And we have celebrated this day now on April the 22nd worldwide, and we call it Earth Day. It's a start, but there's much more to do. But what are the truly important issues that are facing the Earth and humans? These are not issues you hear the politicians talk about. They're generally never in the media. It's not discussed. You hear every kind of thing argued and debated, every minutia, and yet nothing really changes. What are the real threats to our home, our one and only home? Let's quickly review. Impact. That would be meteors, comets, asteroids, and the odd dwarf star. This would be very, very bad. All right? What are we doing to protect ourselves against this? Basically, nothing. Global climate control. Global warming? How about global freezing? The fact is that over the ages, we have had freezing periods and we have had full inundation warm periods. And all I can say is, since the, I'm sorry, let me get up to the next one here. Back to the Ice Age is where we're going. You see, we haven't had one of these, all right, or one of these since civilization expanded 8,000 to 9,000 years ago. Trust me, we can't afford to have one again. So you may be concerned about the global warming issues today. That's nothing compared to if this happens. And so consequently, we have to have global temperature control, or we will see billions of people die and quadrillions of dollars of human civilization washed away or frozen, What are we doing about that? Basically nothing. Coronal mass ejections. If one of these happens, really big one, that's very, very bad. We are an electronic civilization. We could be in deep trouble for months, if not years. What are we doing about that? Nothing. Nuclear pollution. Every one of these thousands of nuclear waste dumps around the world is a prime terrorist target. If one of these dumps is blown up, if you live in that city, you will leave, and everyone else will leave, and you won't be able to come back because that city will not be livable for many, many decades. What are we doing about this? Nothing. There was an attempt to store it. It's a waste of time. And of course, we have issues with nuclear reactors. That's Fukushima before the tsunami. That's Fukushima after the tsunami. How about garbage? Do you think that the garbage situation is under control because you've been recycling a few cans and bottles? Think again. The garbage situation is overwhelmingly out of control. We are creating trillions of tons of garbage, and we don't know what to do with it. It's destroying our groundwater, it's destroying the oceans and our rivers. There's no more place to put it. And what are we doing about that? Basically nothing. The destruction of the oceans, which is related to that. This garbage is starting to accumulate in the center of all of the major oceans. They're called trash vortexes. They're 15 to 20 meters deep, and the two that you see there combined are bigger than South America. They're forming in the gyres that exist where currents do simply go round and round, and so nothing really can leave that area. And they're filling up all over the world. They're referred to as the eastern rubbish patch in the Pacific, and the western rubbish patch. What are we doing about that? Nothing. Fossil fuel pollution. Well, we understand that. The price of the modern era is energy from gas, oil, and coal. We understand that. It's what we had to do. That's how we built our civilization. But unfortunately, 40% of the deaths worldwide every year are caused by water, air, and soil pollution. We are living in the most polluted time in human history. And so the price of these types of energies is now become exorbitant, and it may get worse. Fossil fuel energy cost. As these fossil fuels become rare, or at least the companies that own them say they're rare, they jack the price up. And as the price goes up, people die. Because when energy costs too much, medical supplies, water, food, and all other kinds of services, particularly the developing world, cost more. And people can't afford it, and so they die. 10 million children, 5 million adults per year, because the cost of energy that's putting billions of dollars in the pockets of oil company executives that already own 5 mansions and 2 yachts. And then there's water. This is the really big one. 9 billion people in a few years. There won't be enough fresh water. Most of the major futurist organizations, including the Pentagon, predict wars over water and very substantial disruption of human society because we don't have enough water. What are we doing about that? Basically nothing. And then there's human diseases. As the population goes from 7 to 8 to 9 to 12 billion, and the crowding increases, and the lack of water increases, and other factors, human diseases will increase. Brand new ones will emerge. We laugh about the swine flu and the avian flu and SARS and so forth. There will be more of those. But just to make sure that's not enough, we're creating our own diseases in biowarfare labs around the world. We know they'll never get out. They'll never get loose. We'll just make them in case we might have to have a bio-war someday, or just because it's fun, like playing with Tinker Toys or erector sets. What are we doing about this? Pretty much nothing. And then finally, economic collapse. Brazil is doing fairly well because the government has made some excellent choices. It's a strong country and it's growing. But there's an economic collapse building around the world, and Brazil will not be untouched by this. There will be a price to be paid here. This economic collapse will make everything more difficult. It will make things more scarce. It will make it more difficult to deal with the problems we're facing. And so it'll just be an added-on multiplier of dilemmas. What are we doing about that? I'm watching closely. I'm watching the economic policies in the United States and Europe, and I'm not very pleased with what I'm seeing. It looks to me like they're throwing oil or gasoline on the fire, but that remains to be seen. But this is a global problem that affects the earth and everybody on it. It's not just a matter of somebody being maybe a little poor or a little richer. This has enormous implications. Which brings us to a rather important question. Are there any real solutions to these problems? I just watched for the last 2 years the most expensive election in human history, the presidential election cycle of 2012. We elected one president, a vice president, 435 members of Congress, and 33 members of our Senate. That election cost us $4 billion. Were any solutions of any note put forward? No. Was there any development of new ideas? No. Were third-party ideas and the ideas of parties and people outside Democrats and Republicans brought into play? No. Do we reach out and look for ideas in other countries that are successful and try to incorporate them in the U.S.? No. So we spent $4 billion for basically nothing. And when you look around the world at other countries, though there are some exceptions, and I think Brazil is one of them, overall, the politicians aren't offering any solutions. They're just biding time so they can stay in office, collect their paycheck, maybe get rich, and die before the real trouble begins. That's not good. Are there any real solutions? I think there are. And these real solutions are only going to be found in the post-disclosure world. Why? Let's look at it. Let's talk about the Earth home focus, first of all. All right? Let's focus there. And what we're going to be talking about is this. All right? And what is this? It is extraterrestrial-derived technology. The United States government, probably the Russian government or Soviet government, the Chinese government, have had crash vehicles in their possession for decades. The United States has spent hundreds of billions of dollars studying alien technology from these vehicles and trying to re-engineer it and successfully re-engineering their own craft and what have you. Also studying the energy systems of these craft. All of this is classified. All of this is unavailable. Patents that are, or ideas created by independent inventors are bought up, classified, shelved. Inventors are scared off. And so all of this tech is not available to us. Ben Rich of the Lockheed Skunk Works once said, we're 50 years ahead of anything you might actually see in the sky or on the ground. And my response to Ben is, you know, we have a lot of trouble right now. We're facing a lot of problems. How about bringing some of that 50-year advanced technology out so that we can deal with our problems? No answer. What's it about? It's about these. You see any wings on that saucer? How does that hover? Anti-gravitic propulsion. Anti-gravitic propulsion is a pretty cool thing. What does it mean for us? How about this? Do you think this saucer runs on oil or coal or gas? No, it doesn't. We believe it runs on an entirely new kind of energy system. It's referred to many names: zero-point energy, ground field energy, free energy, quantum field energy, whatever. Essentially, it is tapping into an entirely different source, a source that even our own physics indicates could have unlimited quantity and be extremely cheap. Boy, now that immediately sounds interesting. Now let's consider the real concerns that I mentioned before. Let's consider them again in a post-disclosure world where the extraterrestrial presence has been announced and the United States government and other governments are starting to bring out the extraterrestrial technology for use to deal with the human condition. Extinction level impact. If something truly large hits the planet, don't worry about your credit card debt, folks. You won't have to pay it off. It's over. It's really, really over. Watch the movie Deep Impact. That pretty much sums it up. All right? So, what do we do about that? No problemo. With anti-gravitic propulsion, it's easy to send vehicle out and redirect any object coming our way and do it on a few days' notice. And simply give it a new orbit and send it off somewhere else. Not a problem. Maybe our government's already done this with their own craft. But of course they can't tell us, so we could give them a medal. Or maybe the ETs have done this because they don't like the idea of 10,000 years of civilization going down the drain in a couple of days. Don't know. But they're not telling us that, and until they do, I'll assume they're not doing anything. But in the post-disclosure world, impact won't be a problem. Global temperature control. Not a problem. Why? Anti-gravitic propulsion. Why? All you do is you put solar shielding in space in synchronous orbits designed to reflect or concentrate sunlight. Easy to do. These panels are already being made. If you have anti-gravitic propulsion, you could put hundreds of square miles of these things out there in such a way as to reduce or increase the amount of sunlight hitting the Earth by 1% or 2%, and that's all you need to do to ensure that that doesn't happen, because we can't afford to have that happen again. And so anti-gravitic propulsion, temperature control, forget about global warming, forget about global freezing. That would be nice. Coronal mass ejections. Not good. They can get very large. If a major one hits the Earth, it's going to be very, very unpleasant. Answer, anti-gravitic propulsion. Because you can put shielding out there, designed to come together to provide as much shielding as possible to minimize the impact of a CME in order to not overly disrupt our planet's magnetic shield or our electronic society. Nuclear waste, not a problem. Why? Anti-gravitic propulsion. With anti-gravitics, you can easily take all of the nuclear waste in the world, put it on barges, stick them into orbit, and fire them into the sun. No more waste. All gone. And then, of course, also alien energy technology. It will replace nuclear technology. No more nuclear reactors at all. Problem solved. What about the trillions of tons of garbage? Energy. Why? There is only one way to deal with garbage, folks. It's not dumping it in the ocean. It's not burying it underground and building schools on top of that. It's not putting it on barges. You burn it. You burn it all. Everything. And you burn it with such a hot temperature that you reduce it to fundamental gases that can be recycled. Why don't we do that? Simple. It's very expensive. The cost of energy, the cost of that oil, the gas, the coal, that fills the pockets of our elite 1% industrialists is too high. We can't afford to make the temperature hot enough. And so we fill the oceans with our own garbage. With a new energy source, possibly ET derived, we burn it all. Garbage problem solved. And related to that, of course, is the destruction of our oceans. Again, the energy allows us to not have the garbage to dump in there in the first place. Anti-gravitic propulsion would allow us to build huge semi-flotating devices or craft that would skim the oceans of the world down to 20, 30 meters and skim up all of the billions of tons of garbage out there, bring it back to land, and burn it. Right? Oceans cleaned up. And of course, another factor. With a new energy source comes the ability to create cheap electrons. And the future of the 21st century is cheap electrons. All right? We already have trillions of dollars of infrastructure of wires to deliver electrons. We need to improve those wires so they don't lose too much energy along the way, more efficient. But we don't want to tear that down. But you could create electrons for 1 cent on the dollar in a post-disclosure world. And what does that mean? It means that electric cars are going to become very popular because you'll be able to drive them for a couple of pennies a mile. And everyone will have one. Try to imagine Sao Paulo with not a single combustion engine anywhere in sight. The air would clean up in a few weeks. The sound would drop 80%. It would be quiet, it would be beautiful, it would be breathable in the post-disclosure world. And then there's water. What's the solution to that? That's a big one. Once again, the new energy source. 0-point ground field, whatever it is, if we can generate energy at a fraction of the cost that the oil, coal, and gas cartels are cramming down our throat, we can do this. The most effective way to create pure water is steam distillation, and the largest source of water in the world is the oceans. You desalinize through steam distillation. So why aren't we building these plants all over the world in appropriate places so that everyone has fresh water? You know why? It's very energy demanding and the cost is too high. And so because the cost of oil and gas is too high, we don't have enough fresh water. If energy was dropped 95%, we could satisfy all of the freshwater demands of every human on the planet. But we can't do that because the energy is too expensive and we can't get access to the ET energy or the ET derived related energy because of the truth embargo. Economic recovery. Answer? Energy. Everything costs money. Your energy has energy costs in it. Your toothbrush, your shoes, your food, medicine, everything. When the cost of energy goes up, the cost of everything goes up. Rent goes up. Business costs go up. What happens if we were able to drop the cost of energy worldwide by 95, 98%? What that would do is free up millions of business models, millions of business plans for companies and products that normally could not be viable because of the cost suddenly become viable. And those millions of new ideas, products, and plans hire hundreds of millions of people, and you have an economic renaissance. Instead, we're being choked to death by the cost of energy. Bring energy down, you get your economic renaissance. All of that generates revenues, that generates taxes, taxes pays off debt. You could have a debt-free world in a very short amount of time. But we can't do that. We can't do any of this because the United States government and its allies, including Brazil, have made a decision that we cannot be informed about the extraterrestrial presence for whatever reason at this time. And until we have disclosure of the ET presence, we will not have the means or the media to force the government to then bring this technology into our world, our public domain. And so all of the solutions I recommend cannot be pursued, and all of the problems will continue until their ultimate conclusion sometime later in this century. That is what is at stake in the truth advocacy disclosure movement. And then with respect to emerging natural man-made diseases, we get into another area. We step out of disclosure and we go to another place. And what is that place? Open contact. I'm going to make a simple point. After 16 years, my assessment is that full open contact is not going to happen until formal terrestrial disclosure takes place. First, the nations of the world acknowledge the ET reality to their citizens. The citizens take a year or two to digest that. That will be fun. And then we will be ready for full open contact. The ETs will show up. They'll be on CNN and Brazilian television being interviewed by talk show hosts. And we'll go, well, it's about time you were here. Where have you been? But we haven't had disclosure. So no open contact. Let's talk a little bit about open contact. With respect to contact with extraterrestrials, the movies tend to take a rather dark approach. Independence Day. We won. Give me a break. Battleship, that was interesting. Somehow that thing, hang on. This is the battleship Missouri or whatever. Okay. Is this working? Hang on. I don't think it's going to reach here. That little thing in the left-hand corner is the battleship, and it somehow defeats the big thing there on the right, okay, in our movies. War of the Worlds. We won that one. That's Battle Los Angeles. We sort of had a victory there, though the movie didn't really finish, and maybe we'll get a follow-up. But that's not the way it actually is. This is the movies. And first, before I tell you how it is, let me make a simple point. All of those movies where we defeat the extraterrestrials are fantasy. They're simple fantasy. In a battle between us and the extraterrestrials, we have as much chance as a classroom of kindergarten students would have against a SEAL team. We lose every time. We have no chance at all. Now, I can go into the reasons for that, but they're not complicated. It just wouldn't be a fair fight. So, anybody who proposes a $40 trillion budget so we can defend ourselves against the galaxy is just trying to line their pockets with some new federal money. We don't win against the extraterrestrials. We had better hope that they have relatively good intentions. Here's what it's sort of really like. 1952 sighting over the Capitol. The Belgium Triangle sighting. This is a saucer flying over the Nellis Test Range in Nevada. And then there are the crop circles. Some are by humans, not that one. And some of the ones that turn up 15 minutes after the field was just examined by an overflight. They're putting crop circles on our field. Not quite like the movie Aliens. I don't recall the alien and aliens making crop circles. I don't recall that. These beautiful designs that have created this communication between humans and ETs in the fields of England year after year. This is what they look like. All right? This is not what they look like in War of the Worlds or Independence Day or Battle LA or whatever. This is what they look like. They don't look that mean. They don't look quite that awful, that threatening. And we know this is the way they look because hundreds of thousands of contactees have reported them as looking like this, and thousands of them have actually drawn them and sent those drawings to researchers around the world. And so, just for the sake of argument, let's assume that these extraterrestrials are not here to eat us, kill us, destroy us, enslave us, colonize us, but rather are engaging us for reasons that may have good purpose. Though that doesn't mean all their agendas are nice and that we're not going to be uncomfortable with some of this, or that there's some bad ETs out there that are being held at bay by some political alliance, the Borg, for instance. But let's just assume that we have a positive engagement going on. That brings us to this. Remember I talked about human diseases. What we have learned from the over 1 million written contact reports that have been submitted to researchers, over 1 million contact reports, is that 1, they have extraordinary genetic science. 2, they have the ability to heal anything. And 3, they have extraordinary powers of the mind. Let's talk about the genetics. The genetics seems to be a major component of the extraterrestrial agenda. It is common throughout contact all around the planet. They are the masters of genetic science. It is their stock in trade. 120 years ago, we were driving around in horses and on buggies. We had just invented the telegraph. We didn't have air conditioning. Think about that. Just recently, we mapped the human genome. We're now mapping the genome of other creatures, the entire human genome. Where will we be in 100 more years? Where do you think the ETs are thousands of years from now? They are the masters of genetic science. The implications of that are enormous. They have healed diseases with certain contactees. I have no doubt in my mind the extraterrestrials are capable of healing every single human disease that we know of and anything else that turns up in our near future. That's kind of nice. I'd like to get to know them. We also know that they are fully telepathic. They can read your mind. They can send images to you and make you, well, they can turn you off. They can put you to sleep. They can make you see what they want. If I was an extraterrestrial, I could have every one of you in this audience thinking that you were talking to Tony the Tiger or Yogi Bear up here. And you would go home and say, wow, I just heard a lecture from Yogi Bear. Why isn't that cool? That's some pretty powerful mind stuff, folks. So, open contact may lead to access to these kinds of technologies. Why would they do that? Why not? If you're going to make friends with a new civilization, curing most of their diseases is a nice housewarming gift. I mean, it's a way to say hello, how are you? All your diseases can be cured. And you know what we'd say to that? We'd say, thank you. And what can we do for you? Do you need a place to live? I've got a room in the back of my house. You could stay there. But it gets more interesting. I'm going to propose an idea to you that you may not have thought of. And it's incredibly profound in my view. And it goes like this. I believe that when we finally know the full story, we will learn that starfaring civilizations, going back, pick any number, 1,000, 100,000, million, 10 million years, have been moving genetic material from star system to star system throughout the entire galaxy. Now, what does that mean? It means there is DNA life material from this planet, not only now, but maybe 100 million years ago, that is active and being engaged on perhaps planets all over the galaxy, and non-terrestrial DNA has been brought here. Think about the implications of that. We're not only not alone, we may be genetically connected throughout the galaxy. So don't think of biosphere, think of biodisk. We know they're taking genetic material. The contactees have reported that. We know they're creating hybrids and second-level hybrids and third-level hybrids. We don't know where they are. We believe they have tampered with our, not tampered, but affected our DNA. And when someone is taken into a craft and a reptilian or an insectoid being shows up, an obvious question to ask is, how is it that it looks reptilian? Is it possible that a life form on another star system, 100 million light years away, developing from primordial sloop for 5 billion years, ends up looking like a reptilian? What are the odds? Pretty high. Or is it possible that reptilian DNA from the Earth was taken 1 million years ago elsewhere and incorporated in developing entities, which then look reptilian because they have Earth reptilian DNA in them? Oh, I think so. And what about the ETs that look like humans? Does anybody think that a star system 1 million light years away, that a being is going to emerge from the evolutionary process and look just like a Swedish skiing instructor? Do you really think that? How is that possible? Unless human DNA has been taken from here and developed elsewhere, who knows how many times. They're simply coming back to meet their ancestral home. Now you see how profound disclosure is. Right? We're not alone. We're connected probably to the entire galaxy. I dare say beyond the galaxy, who knows? That's the reality that's being kept from you. And then one other thing. I believe that disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence by the world governments may lead to this: the greatest era of reform in human history. Institutional reform and transparent government is where we have to go. Because the currency of the 21st century, it's not going to be dollars, it's not going to be the yuan or gold or silver or chocolate. The currency of the 21st century is going to be trust. Without trust, your money is worthless. The Soviet Union had money, but it had no trust. The people didn't trust the government knew the people didn't trust the government, and the people knew the government knew the people didn't trust the government, and the whole thing collapsed in 1991. The United States, after winning the Cold War, decided, why don't we just emulate the Soviets? Let's build up propaganda machines. Let's start institutional lying. Let's divert. Let's corrupt. Let's just mimic the Soviet Union. And guess what? Trust in government has collapsed in the United States. They built up a vast secret empire. They didn't reduce classified materials. They increased them. Built underground facilities. Created surveillance satellites. We're more Soviet now in America than the Soviets were when they were Soviet. They just haven't gone the rest of the way and built the gulags and put KGB agents on every corner. But we're heading there. I don't know why we're doing that. It's kind of odd. But that's changing. There is a counterforce building up against this, which is going to combine, I think, with disclosure, which is the door to the next era. And there are a couple of examples that I point to. One is WikiLeaks. And of course, its founder, this man, Julian Assange. This is a sea change in the world. You'll see more organizations like this coming about, mimicking what WikiLeaks is doing, whatever happens to Assange. This is the first really major threat to the institutional structures of the modern time. And they are scared to death. And the other one I kind of like is Anonymous. Anonymous really intrigues me. That's supposed to, that's supposed to do something cool. Is it going to do it? It's not going to do it. So I'm going to tell you, we are anonymous. We are legion. We never forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. This is basically the internet speaking to power. There are 10 million 12-year-olds out there already thinking about how they're going to hack the state, how they're going to challenge the rising authorities. And they're much better with computers than any of us. And so this portends some interesting possibilities in the future. It's time to open the archives. It's time for disclosure. It's time to move to another time. What is PRG going to do about this? The next step for Paradigm Research Group is the most important project of its 16-year history. It is going to, and it's going to be regarding this, congressional hearings. Congressional hearings were designed in the United States to get facts so members of Congress could legislate. They're held in hearing rooms in buildings across Washington, D.C., in the Senate and House of Representative office buildings. One of the most famous is the Hart Senate hearing room in the Hart building. Another is the Dirksen Senate hearing room. Over the years, there have been important hearings. You probably remember the Army McCarthy hearings in the 1950s. These were extremely interesting and very controversial. Then, of course, you had the Watergate hearings in the 1970s, televised all over the world. Then you had the Iran-Contra hearings that were held in these rooms in the 1980s. You had Supreme Court nomination hearings that were held. Recently, we had hearings on tobacco and health, and very recently, hearings on the Benghazi attacks. This is part of the democratic process in the United States. The hearing process is broken down. It doesn't work anymore, but what else works in the United States? When was the last congressional hearing on UFO, now the ET issue? Well, that was 45 years of sightings ago in 1968. That was the last hearing on this subject. Given all that's happened since then, all of the evidence, the witnesses, the documentation, the documentaries, the books, the papers, hasn't been a hearing in 45 years. On May 3rd, Paradigm Research Group is going to hold a citizen hearing in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club. The full title is the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure of an Extraterrestrial Presence Engaging the Human Race. It is going to, this is the motto of the citizen hearing, appropriately, will be, if Congress will not do its job, the people will. This is the announcement website. It's just an announcement. The full website will not go up until early January. The website is, of course, citizenhearing.org. What we are going to do is we're going to bring 40 to 50 of the most powerful international witnesses in the world to Washington, D.C. to to a room, or to the ballroom of the National Press Club, which is going to be made and configured to look like a Senate hearing room, with a 300 audience section, press section, testifying tables, and a committee tables. And these witnesses will give 30 hours of testimony over 5 days to 5 former members of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. It will be live streamed to the world. It will be videotaped, or rather filmed, in 2D, 3D high definition. A full theatrical documentary is going to be made about this citizen hearing. It's going to be promoted by PR firms in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. Our goal is that nobody in the Western world doesn't know that this hearing is going to take place. And the goal of this hearing is to create a chain reaction in the media so that they finally say enough is enough and start asking the right questions of the right people. And our hope is that the truth embargo will be over by the summer of 2013. Paradigm Research Group has received a grant from a philanthropist of $1.1 million to see that this gets done right. And that grant has been received. This is the ballroom of the National Press Club where the citizen hearing will be taking place. This is, in fact, the same room in May 9, 2001, when Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project brought 20 witnesses in for a press conference that lasted about 2 hours. It was a major event. There were 100 reporters and camera crews there, 17 tripods, many nations. And the potential of this event was great, but the attacks on 9/11 essentially erased that potential. This is another press conference that was held by Leslie Kean and James Fox, where international witnesses were brought in November of 2007. Again, an important event, lasted a couple of hours. What's different with the citizen hearing is that these events did not reach critical mass. They did not set off a chain reaction. We believe the size and scope of the citizen hearing will in fact do that. It will last 5 days. It will be covered worldwide. It will be live streamed around the world, and the press will see testimony after testimony of the evidence that the White House in November of last year, said doesn't even exist. I think the press is saying enough is enough. In the press club, there is a plaque on the wall. It is donated there by the Columbia School of Journalism in honor of one of its famous alumni, Joseph Pulitzer. The first phrase of that plaque is incredibly important to every country on this planet, and it reads, "Our republic and its press will rise or fall together." That is why the first thing that invading countries do, or coups do, is go and take over the radio and the television. Our media in the United States have let us down. They have failed us over and over again. We hope to change that. We think disclosure of the ET presence will be their first real opportunity to redeem themselves. And now to close. A couple of years ago, Paradigm Research Group created World Disclosure Day. It is July the 8th, a day to acknowledge the disclosure movement, the need for this truth embargo to end, and we invite people to participate and hold events. This next one could be very interesting. It will occur approximately 2 months after the citizen hearing. Today, I am calling on the countries of South and Central America, in particular these countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Peru, and Uruguay, chosen because they have connections to this issue, significant connections to this issue, through events, through research, through military witnesses coming forward, to the release of UFO files. And I'm suggesting that Brazil might be the nation to lead this group. And what am I suggesting? That these countries meet privately, obviously it has to be privately, and decide to form a coalition that will, perhaps on July the 8th of 2013, come forward together and acknowledge the extraterrestrial presence, produce the evidence from their own Air Force files, from their own Air Force chase planes and the gun camera footage, and end this truth embargo. I assure you the rest of the nations of the world, including the United States, will follow within days. It's time for South America, I think, to assert its rightful place on this planet. It has been neglected. It has been marginalized. It has been exploited. And that is wrong. There are great things happening down here. Brazil is one of the leading, most progressive nations in the world dealing with the issues that we're facing. South America has an opportunity to assert itself in historical legacy. I invite them to take it. I don't care if the United States is not the first nation. I just want to see disclosure, and the sooner the better. And if it starts in South America, so be it. World Disclosure Day, July 8th. I don't expect them to give a press release in advance. I expect them to agree to do it, and it'll just happen on that day. So let's think about that, looking forward to next year. And let's understand that our place ultimately is in the galaxy. We will be part of a galactic reality. But it is not going to be handed to us. We're not going to be given a free pass. We're going to have to go there on our own. We're going to have to do what is necessary. And the first thing we have to do is end this ridiculous truth embargo that is 20 years past its prime. It needs to end. We need the truth. We have a right to know. We have a need to know. And we can most certainly handle the truth. Thank you for your comment.